Natasha Clark is here, LBC's political editor. Big day today and tomorrow with Keir Starmer and Rishi Sunak both taking calls and properly taking calls, a full hour, doing it properly. I'm not sure anyone else is getting that sort of level of access. What were the big takeaways from Keir Starmer's appearance this morning?
I think my main big takeaway is just how calm he seemed today. He seemed very confident in what he was saying. He didn't have any stumbles. He didn't trip over anything. He didn't even have, as far as I could see, any notes beside him when he was sitting, in fact, in this chair half an hour ago. He just seemed like a man that genuinely felt like he had it all together. He had all of his answers. He obviously faced some really tough questions, including some I imagine that he wouldn't have expected, things like the Northern Ireland Legacy Act. He was challenged by a veteran saying, you're going to open up a witch hunt for my fellow veterans once again. He wouldn't have been prepared for that answer, but he did have answers for everything, and obviously it
would have been DPP when some of this was put in place, though. So I mean,
exactly,
it's an unexpected curveball, but not necessarily one he wouldn't be able to play.
And after so long on the campaign trail, we've had 3.5 weeks of this campaign now. I imagine he has been thrown nearly every single question he potentially is going to get thrown, and obviously our job is to try and get some callers to ask him something a little bit different, which he may not have heard before. But I think he did genuinely bat every single question off pretty well. Interestingly as well, he repeatedly defended himself on private schools. That's obviously something that we on LBC have talked quite a lot about from both sides of the debate. We've heard from schools who were worried about the impact on it. We've also heard from parents, from teachers. We've also heard from people that really love the policy and want to see it rolled out across schools so that we can get more money into state schools too.
This is really interesting because there is of all the subjects that I think are magnified by the background of journalists in this country, I suspect that the private education issue is the biggest, because almost all of us who've achieved a degree of prominence in the UK media went to private school. Not everybody. Not everybody. But almost all of us. Certainly hard to think of editor level, even Paul Dacre. Everybody went to private school. So the sense that it's a much bigger issue in editorial conferences and studios than it is anywhere else.
It's also just a really big talker. It's one that we get called
today.
all
we
the
love
time.
the topic.
Yeah.
But I don't know how many electoral needles. Should we have a listen to how he dealt with the question on VAT?
Yeah, absolutely. There we go. Here's the clip.
Mike in Berkshire. I'm in a marginal Berkshire seat. I've given up on the Tories. I would be minded to give Labour a chance, but I seem to be one of those people the Labour have chosen to despise. I'm a moderately successful, aspirational parent who's elected to choose private education. VAT at 20% feels like a super tax on me. He is not alone. The head teacher of the school that your wife attended says this will cause significant disruption for children forced to leave school, but we're even more concerned about the capacity of local schools. The head of the school that you attended, Reigate Grammar, says this will inevitably lead to thousands of children going to already oversubscribed state schools. How come you know better than all these teachers?
Well, Nick, firstly, I've got nothing against private schools, and I do understand that many parents save hard and work hard to send their children to private schools because they have real aspiration for them. But I also understand that all parents have aspiration for their children, including parents who send their children to a state school. And I want to make sure that every single child, wherever they come from, whatever their background, has the opportunity to get on in life and that feels that success belongs to them.
Why is this such a hot topic?
I don't know.
No, I want to tell you.
Go.
I think it's because it reaches back to what the Labour Party stand for, right? Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, Tony Blair wanted to be the party of aspiration. He said he didn't want to tax wealth. He didn't want that to be a dirty word. And this all goes back to, I think, what he's trying to change the Labour Party into being.
So it changes the mood music without actually changing that many people's lives. It just creates...
It's about what it signifies and what it represents.
That's a really clever observation. It says we are actually about addressing the unfair distributions in this country. But this is a tiny tinker, but it speaks to a much bigger issue.
It does. And exactly the problem is, though, on the other side of the equation, you've got things like the two-child benefit cap, which he deliberately doesn't want to send that signal for. And he doesn't want to...
Because it would cost so much.
It wouldn't cost anything at all. It cost something like £1.52 billion.
Is that right? I thought it was hugely expensive.
No, two-child benefit cap. I don't think it's very much at all. Potentially a little bit more, but I thought I'd read that it was around £2 billion. But that's something that I think he wants to make a principle on. I think he wants to make a principle on the point of VAT on school fees, believing that this is something that if you're only a small slither of people that go to private education, 7% of kids, I think, privately educated, he believes that for the greater good of kids in non-private
fees
schools,
have gone
it's
up
worth
loads
doing
in
it.
the last 20 years as well. Loads and loads and loads. My old school now costs about £1 million a term. But Mike, the listener's not here to defend himself, but claiming that you feel despised because you're being asked to pay VAT on your school fees, forgive me, it's pathetic, really. It's real world's smallest fire. Where was it when the bedroom tax came in, I wonder?
Yeah,
and various other very punitive policies that hit the poorest people in the country right between the legs.
But for Sir Keir Starmer, he's trying to appeal to those Tory voters, those people that used to back the Conservatives that might now come across to the Labour Party. And that, a lot of people think, is an incredibly damaging policy for that, because they believe that it will hit them in the wallet. So it's a really tough balance that he's trying to strike. And he went on to talk about how the fact that he's changed the Labour Party, and obviously you talked sort of at the top of the show about this. Is he being careful enough to win this now? Is he feeling confident enough? He looked to me like a man that does feel like things are going very well for him.
We use the word unclenching, Natasha. I don't know.
You use the word unclenching.
Yeah, but is it? I mean, it describes what you're alluding to, doesn't it? There is a sense of unclenching, both in the leadership and in the support, I think.
Well, of course, he's doing so well in the polls. Everything is pointing to the fact that he's doing so well, and is expected to do well in this election, and he makes no apologies for the fact that he's changed the party. He did admit that he would have served under a Jeremy Corbyn Prime Minister, which was a very interesting admission.
Was it? He was in the shadow cabinet. He kind of couldn't have not been in the cabinet in the event of an election. It's all a bit of a gotcha.
Potentially, but equally, this is a guy that he's now, slagging off. He's now trying to discredit Jeremy Corbyn. He's bumped him out of the party.
He's outside the tent. But,
he is.
Charlie puts it perhaps more pithily than we managed to. The private school thing is a beacon to the left. Starmer telling them he hasn't forgotten them.
Potentially.
Because it is the kind of thing that historically they like.
Yeah.
And it's working. What else have we got?
I think also I wanted to touch on more of his plans for Israel-Palestine. This is something that we know has hurt voters in certain communities. We know that his previous LBC interview, where he appeared to suggest that he would cut off water supplies to Gaza in self-defence of Israel, that got him into a real sticky muddle. We don't quite know whether that's going to have an effect on the polls and the voters or not. But today he revealed a bit more details about plans for what a Palestine and Israel deal would look like.
I've said repeatedly, Israel has to exercise its right to self-defence within international law. No, Abby, and anyway, I'm not going to sit in an LBC studio and pronounce that something is either genocide or not. And I'll tell you for why, Nick.
You can't decide about the guns, the weapons. I'm sorry, you can't decide about genocide. Why,
Nick? Allow me, please. In the fall of Yugoslavia, all sorts of atrocities were committed. I represented Croatia in the International Court for 3 months, where we argued about genocide. We reviewed 3 months' worth of evidence. At the end of that, the court itself then had to make a decision based on all of the evidence. That's how it works.
More competent response than in the interview you refer to from...
Yeah, exactly. He's clearly cleaned up his response on that. He won't go so far as to call it a genocide. I'm sure some people will be very angry to hear those words, but saying it's not for me to decide, it's for a court to decide those sort of actions. But also laying a little bit more of the flesh on the bones about what a peace deal for Palestine looks like. He's saying that the conditions are not yet there for a stable state of Israel, for a viable, I think he called it, state of Palestine. But that will be really interesting to see. He's obviously trying to flesh that on the bones to try and repair some of the damage, I think, from that previous interview.
I am told, and this may be the basis of my next phone-in, actually, on the programme, that the ground game, as it were, the ground campaign is not reporting much love yet for Keir Starmer on the doorsteps. Why might that be?
As we were sort of discussing off air, is it because Keir Starmer is being honest with what he can promise the voters?
He's not making
big outlandish promises. He's not making Nigel Farage-esque claims about the amount of money that we've got to spend. He's being very honest. The finances are very tight. He said repeatedly he doesn't have a magic wand and he can't sell you the earth. And he's trying to be honest about it.
Maybe. I mean, Sunak could possibly fit into that category as well.
He definitely potentially did, obviously, during the last Tory leadership
but he's swerved a bit since. And I think that's a really good I think that's a really good analysis, and it's a really interesting question, isn't it? Can we remember? You're too young. I wasn't paying attention in 1997. But did Tony Blair enjoy messianic status among voters, even as his opinion poll leads were this sort of size?
Well, actually, there was a book that I think a fellow journalist was tweeting an extract from a couple of weeks ago, saying that even in 1997, the media, the polls are saying exactly the same thing. No one's enthused about Tony Blair. He's not quite the same. He's not got the same style.
Rewrites history, isn't it?
Exactly, but everybody thinks now that he is absolutely the answer.
Partly the scenes on Downing Street that night, and also I think D Ream have a lot to answer for.
They do.
I think that Things Can Only Get Better anthem is part of our collective memory, whereas in fact at the time maybe there wasn't much love for Tony Blair on the doorstep.